Manik Saha. He's the regional CIO of SAP or SAP. And I know I was just talking with Lito, of the head of Miascor, and he just implemented his SAP system a few months ago. So widely used, and a bit of a different, fresh idea. Certainly if you want to pay your taxes properly and so forth, you need to have a good system in place. And if you need to professionalize your organization, a similar situation. So please welcome Manik Saha, please, Regional CIO.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. And once I have my slides on screen, I'm going to give you maybe a different perspective on all the discussions that are going on. First of all, I'm not from the finance background, so this might be a different perspective, but I'm from IT, I'm from technology, and as a company in SAP, we've been doing a lot in terms of technology to help enable communities around the world and help people do different things in different ways. And one of the perspectives that I want to talk about today is that there is a partnership that has been built up between the CIO and the CFO. And this is really becoming more and more important as we go forward. And I'm going to tell you why I think this is really important. So first of all, right, there is a new reality that's happening today. Actually, you can see this in this room. If I remember maybe 5-10 years ago, if you went to a conference, people would really have all these notepads and these pens, and they would write down all the different notes that they see in the conference. But if I just look behind me at that table out there, there are a couple of laptops. Instead of copying the notes on the table, people are taking pictures. They're more or less digitizing this whole thing. If you look at the way that you are living today, your world is extremely digital. It's very connected. One example that I liked in the previous message was that if you want to buy insurance today, it doesn't matter where this insurance is coming from. It can come from any country, it can come from any part of the world, which basically points to a very simple fact that we are today in a networked economy. It is no longer about the political boundaries that you have within a country, but it's about how do you have a good business model that transcends these political boundaries. So I actually picked up this picture from, or these two pictures, just to show what happens in a rock concert. And if you look at the left-hand side, there was a point in time where people used to go to the rock concerts and they used to be going there to cheer, right? And if you look at the right-hand side today, you see people are going to rock concerts, and the first thing they're doing is they're taking out their phones and the iPads and their notebooks and whatever, and they're taking the pictures of the star in the rock concert, which just goes to show how much digital we've become, how our world has more or less changed in order to more or less get transformed into adopting technology into everything that we do. And this has a very far-reaching impact on everybody out here, and especially the consumer behavior. And let me explain a bit about what I mean by that. Just some numbers, and I think during this presentations throughout the day, right, we talked about the growth of the middle class. The growth of the middle class is happening in this part of the world. There is make no mistake about it. This is where it's happening. If you look at India, if you look at China, if you look at Southeast Asia, the ASEAN countries, this is where the next generation growth is coming through. Huge amount of the population will reach middle class. They will have a consumption power. They will have a spending power that comes with it. Of course, as a part of that, they will also want some basic necessities in life. They want, a certain quality of life in terms of the education. They want a certain quality of life in terms of the health and the lifestyle, and all this comes along with being a part of this middle class. The second thing is that there is an estimate by 2020 we'll have 50 billion devices connected globally. And when I talk about 50 billion devices, it's not just about smartphones and tablets and PCs, but it's about computing in almost everything that you touch and do in your lives. We already have instances where in your clothes you have microchips out there. How many of you know of this Fitbit device? Anybody heard of it? Well, it's a wristband that you have. And exactly, it's a gentleman from the sports shop would know about it. This connects to your iPhone, and it basically monitors things like your heart rate, your activities, and gives you insights into, whether you're leading a healthy life or you're, drinking too much on the weekends. So that's something that is coming through. And the integration of all these devices are helping us as human beings, achieve a better quality of life, achieve a better standard of living. If you looked at sales, 60% of the people do their research before walking into a shop to buy a product. That means as a shop owner, you don't know your customers, who they are going to be out there, and for all you know, they've done all the research and they're just coming to the shop to pick up the product. They've done the research, they know your prices, and if you're not out there before they come into your shop, you're losing a certain section of the customers. So this is the world out there. One example is that I think you might know in the US, they have these Cyber Monday sales. 2.9 billion of sales on one day on Cyber Monday. So that is the kind of volume that you're looking at, and it's all electronic. Personal experience, I lived in Germany for 2 years, 2009 and 10. There was a point in time towards the end of my stay where, except for essential grocery shopping, everything that I bought was online, everything, and including clothes, your furniture, your Nespresso coffee capsules. It's all ordered online, it's delivered to your doorstep, and you basically have the weekends to yourself and your family. And this is the kind of generation that we're leading towards, and I think the opportunity here is really massive. And the last thing, and I think this is really where it kind of starts to come together, maybe you've heard of this term called the Internet of Things. This is really where people have devices and people have sensors all over the place, which are kind of connected together to give you an overall better experience. We can see this starting to come through to reality today, but this has a huge implication in the way we are going to interact with each other. It has a huge implication in the way that we want to work in the future. And all this has to somehow make sense from an overall point of view. And this brings me to what is my role. So when I took the job last year, basically it was a chief information officer, which was pretty much, hey, take care of the IT systems in the company, and that's your role. But more and more, this role is, the scope of the role is expanding, and it's no longer sufficient to just have the IT systems running. It's much more about becoming the business enabler as a part of a digital economy out there for the organization. And which is why I think it's always very important to keep the IT systems running, but at the same time to move on to new topics and new paradigms. For example, looking at how do you integrate the different systems together? How do you integrate your company with other companies out there who want to collaborate on doing a certain business together? And then finally, also looking at the new topics that are coming on the horizon from an innovation point of view, and bring them into the organization in a very seamless way. So my job today is actually much less of looking at the operational aspects of IT, but it's much more to look at the strategic aspects and figuring out what are the steps that we need to make with the business to make the next step happen. Finance is one area, but I'm just going to show you what are the other interaction areas that I need to look at. So as a part of this shift, what's happened is that the left-hand yellow block that you see, this used to be maybe the old portfolio, which is, manage your devices, manage the PCs, manage your applications, and manage the end user, mobiles and tablets that they have, and that was it. That's being relegated to the bottom left-hand corner of that stack out there, where it's no longer sufficient just to manage and operate this stuff from IT. First of all, it's about increasing the productivity of the employees that you have in a company, which means that what are we doing from an organization point of view with the technology that's out there to decrease the unit cost per employee within the company. Obviously, this means that you need to increase the efficiency, you need to increase certain productivity factors within the organization, which also has an impact on the overall profit margin that you finally want to drive within a company. The second aspect that comes with it is that, and I think this is very relevant for the Philippines, at some point in time, and this is already happening with a lot of companies here, you need to grow beyond the country's boundaries. You need to become, from the Philippines to the ASEAN region, then grow beyond ASEAN to Asia, and then probably the rest of the world. And in order to be able to do that, you need to figure out the right working model to go through these different steps of transformation And today, IT is one of the key enablers to help you do that. Of course, at the end of the day, we all deal with people. Our employees are people, and what really makes it work for them is what is the user experience that they have working within the company that can facilitate this overall productivity shift. So just a short snapshot of some thoughts I had in terms of in an IT role, who should an IT person be talking to within the organization, and what are some of the key topics that we need to be talking about. I think in the morning we talked quite a lot about governance, risk and compliance. This is one big topic that you see on the right hand side where especially today with the digitization, with the e-commerce economy coming through, your risk boundary is not within the walls of your company. It's a virtual boundary. It's where you are doing business. It may be on a website. It may be on some kind of e-commerce site that you have. And this is something that needs to be managed in a very strong way. The part that comes with it is fraud detection and managing your fraud in a proper risk manner. What this also means is, how fast can you detect fraud after it's happened? So there are tools out there in the market which can do it in real-time basis. There are tools out there which can start to detect certain trends and patterns which can help you. But on the more optimistic side, there is also a growth story that comes with it. So for example, if you're looking at manufacturing as a sector, would you start off with let's say the third generation manufacturing in the industry 3.0 with a supply chain and a manufacturing line, or would you go towards something that we have today, and it's been talked about a lot in Germany, for example, which is the industry 4.0, which is how do we use more sensors, electronics, automation to make the whole manufacturing chain smarter? How do we reduce the dependency of errors that are introduced by having humans in that production process, but put them smartly in areas where the production can be much more self-sufficient and more highly effective actually. How do we manage zero inventory? I mean, we've talked about zero inventory for the last couple of decades, but we've never really come down to a true zero inventory. So how do we come closer to that? You all have all heard about 3D printing. 3D printing has fundamentally the possibility to completely change how manufacturing will look like in the future. People will no longer ship products, but they're going to be selling designs. And the IP will be associated with the design, which you can then print maybe in your house for certain scenarios, and then maybe in a local setup in certain other scenarios. And what this means for all of us is that on one hand, yes, we can always think locally and regionally, but the market out there is much bigger than that. The market out there is the globe. You can have a good product today anywhere in the world, and you can market it to any other place in the world, and the cost to market it in somewhere else in the world is actually very low. Two of the topics I will talk about with examples of what we did within our organization in SAP is with procurement and finance. I think we went through a huge transformation in the last couple of years on these two areas, simply because we are a pretty global organization. We operate in 70 different countries. Nevertheless, we had to have a way, excuse me, how do we bring all the information back together and have consolidation in terms of how much do we spend globally, which suppliers do we talk to, and then from a finance point of view, how do we get full transparency in terms of what's happening in every single part of the globe. So with that one simple example of what a factory or a manufacturing organization might look for the future, and these are potential insights in terms of if you had to invest in a certain topic or the manufacturing sector, what should you be looking at in these sectors? So in the past, you had pretty much like a manufacturing setup was, yes, you had raw materials, you had people, you had a manufacturing process, and then they produced basically multiple units of the same thing at the end of a production line. And then over the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, there's been this huge invent or come through of topics like sensors, topics like automation with PCs. This is more or less indispensable tool for me. This is my iPhone. And I think this runs my life more than I run this device. But this is also becoming a part of the manufacturing process. So work orders can be given to the phone, and somebody carrying that phone can receive these work orders and execute it depending on proximity to where the problem is. So when you put all this together, we are looking at something that is a smart factory for the future, a factory where the demand and supply are much closer matched, the factory where the production line has information that it's feeding back to the people who are running it, and the quality is maintained along the factory line instead of having quality assurance maybe at the end or at some part of the process. So very different view. There are quite a few pilots that are happening in different companies like Bosch and Siemens and so on, where they are experimenting with this. I think in Asia, so I've been to practically all the big economies of the region. I think the opportunity that we have in Asia is that we can potentially leapfrog the generations of technologies that was before us and then directly invest into the future. So we don't have to necessarily build a factory that was, a bit like the old factory style, but we can directly invest in factories that are more modern. So, what's the role of a CFO today? And I think this is some of it. Actually, I had some other bullets out there, but I will just more or less call it out. On one hand, the CFO is responsible for the finance of the company, the financial situation, but they also need to have a very clear idea about where to invest in from a corporate point of view. And this is simply because, like IT, a CFO function actually transcends and crosses all the different functions that you have in an organization. And given that you have some money that you have as an investment opportunity, they can decide where the maximum benefit for the company would be. That's a tough job, especially in a company like ours, because you have everybody raising their hand saying that, look, I have the next best project on the planet, and I need the money. So everyone's going to be doing that. And I think it's about rationalizing what makes sense for the near term, what makes sense for the midterm, and then also investments that we need to make for the long term. As a technology company, I think the benefit that we have is that we've realized and understood over the years and experience that in some cases you don't have a return of investment that you can put in dollars and cents today. I give you one example. 4 years ago, when we said that we want to have corporate devices with iPhones and we want to enable not just email but other applications on it, there was no return of investment case. And the simple reason is because there was no baseline. There was no way to determine how this kind of a device would influence the lives of everybody around you. And just because of that, we didn't want to get into a discussion about, how much should we spend on these devices, how much should we pay on the data plans and the subscription models, and how much do we get out of it. But we said that, okay, let's try it out as a pilot. Let's put in a group of maybe 4,000 people globally and give them all these devices, and let's see what comes back. I can tell you, fast forward to today, we would never, ever go back to a world where we will take away these devices from the users. This is now the de facto way of working in our organization. But 4 years ago, there was no way to determine a business case. It was an innovation play. It was a bit of a more or less entrepreneurship approach where you say that, look, let's invest in technology, let's invest in some of these new topics that are out there, and we expect a certain return comes through. That's also another role that comes from a CFO point of view, that they need to start to understand where some of these technologies could lead the company towards and invest in this. There is one topic that I was reading up quite a bit on last night, and I think this might be of interest in this audience, which is about the Bitcoin. I think you'll have all heard and seen a lot of news about it. The first time I heard about Bitcoin last year, I think it was trading at $39 per Bitcoin. Then earlier this year it was at $1,200 plus dollars for one Bitcoin, and then now I think it's come down to 500-600 levels again. So obviously I now wish that I could have a time machine to go back and buy it at $30 and do it. But again, what this shows us is that, again, the currency that we talk about today is not limited to a geography. Bitcoin doesn't exist with any single financial institution. It's a network that is more or less managing it. What was even more surprising for me is that how liquid the currency is. There are almost every kind of establishment that you have, or from a sector point of view in the US, somebody or the other is accepting Bitcoins as a form of payment. Last week in Singapore, we had the first Bitcoin ATM that was set up by a company where you could pretty much transact in Bitcoins, withdraw money, deposit money, convert it to cash. Some things to think about, because if we are going towards the digital economy in the future, CFOs need to figure out how to accept payments using some different forms of currencies, some of which the banking fundamentals of today basically don't apply. Okay, so interesting thoughts to think about. Two examples, and my apologies, a bit of a SAP-centric slide on this, but since I'm from the company, I want to give you a bit of a perspective. Like most other companies, yes, we have a finance function. We want to be able to grow, we want to be able to scale, but at the same time, we don't want to compromise on any of our corporate and regulatory requirements that we have. Some of this, for us especially, because we are operating in 70 different countries globally, we need to take what is applicable for every single country to make sure that we are compliant with all of them. What we also need to do from a business point of view is to look at things like the credit outstanding, the days outstanding in terms of sales. We want to look at our liquidity positions. We want to look at our cash positions. We also have been on a pretty high growth path in the last couple of years. So we also want to make sure that the acquisitions that we made, the return is coming in. At the same time, we have money for future acquisitions and growth going forward. And what this means fundamentally is that with technology, we can start to transform the finance process in a way that, first of all, is giving the investors of their organization the kind of information that they need to see, give it to them fast, but there is a secondary benefit to it, and the secondary benefit is that when you get better at your finance processes within the organization, your overall organization, which depends on the budgets and which depends on the allocations that you're given through a year, these become much more efficient. So, we have a product called SAP HANA. It's the only real-time database that is in the world, and we used it for our financial system last year to close the books. And for the first time in the history of our company, we were able to close the books, or let's say pre-announce the results for the whole company for the year in about 8.5 days. And 8.5 days obviously includes the weekends and also. On the 9th of Jan this year, we announced our, pre-announced our results. And I don't think this has been possible for us in the last 42 years that we've been running the company, simply because of the complexity that we have of running and consolidating books from all these different legal entities that we have. What was even more interesting is that as a result of being able to get clarity in terms of your financial position early on in the year, I, as an employee, for the first time in my, let's say, 8.5 years in the company, have very clear priorities and goals that I need to drive within the organization by the end of January. So for the rest of the year, for 11 months in the year, I can focus on my business. I can focus on where I need to drive the growth. I can focus on investing in certain projects and technologies that make my function more valuable for the organization. So this has been a bit of a growth track that we did. For us, it was also one of those topics where we said, okay, let's invest in innovation that can facilitate this discussion. Let's invest in some of these areas that can fast-track finance. The second area that we also significantly invested last year, we have a huge amount of suppliers globally, as you can imagine, because of the way our business works. And one of the key projects last year was to try to consolidate the spend we have with all the different suppliers so that we can have a more or less a transparent view on where we are spending, how much we are spending, and also, in a certain sense, detect where there are opportunities to consolidate certain contracts. So we implemented a couple of interesting topics. So one of the key ones was electronic auctions. And I think that there are very few companies which do it as a corporate function, which is to run e-auctions. The advantage of looking into these kind of opportunities is that, again, you don't limit your supplier pool to a local supplier pool. What you are looking at is to get a set of services from somebody at the best cost. And with these kind of auctions and opportunities, you really open it up from a perspective that any kind of global player can come into that auction. They can bid for the certain services. As a company, we learn a lot through this process because the different suppliers are coming with different opportunities to us. We can also learn what's out there in the market, what's the latest and the greatest. And finally, what matters to us is that we get maybe the best pricing out there. So this is something that's really worked for us. Last year, we implemented a solution on SAP Ariba, and we started to already consolidate 1,000 suppliers on this network. Last year, we had a spend on this network around 400 billion euros. I think this was in a period of only 6 months. Our global spend from a volume point of view is around 3.6 billion euros. But what we plan to do is this year we want to increase the footprint about how many suppliers we want to get in. The message out here that I want to leave you with is that when companies are going through this growth path, right, they need to look at all these different dimensions in a company and start to get them to work together. It's not just about one growth, and to achieve scale, it's not about just adding resources and multiplying it from the scale, but it's also to get the economies of scale with it to reduce the number of resources that you need in order to scale up. It's about having the right technologies in place that the companies can move in the right direction. It's about playing and thinking global but acting local. What this means is pretty much to say that how can you have your products, your company goods in a global marketplace, but at the same time, in certain scenarios where you need a local service, you can provide that service in the best customer-friendly manner in the local environment. So, this is ready for maybe, I'll try to give you a bit of a non-technical explanation on this. The way I look at it, right, every company has an organizational architecture, right? And where the architecture kind of starts to begin with is that every company is running processes. And you need to have certain number of tools and certain number of software that is basically running these processes. And that is just to get the first level of efficiency into the company, that you're able to do repetitive tasks faster. But once you've gone through that stage, what you need to be able to do is to introspect end-to-end processes and to get a better understanding of where you can optimize it. And this is where analytics comes in, where you are able to look at a complete end-to-end supply chain, your end-to-end logistics, your end-to-end manufacturing processes, and look at where you need to invest in order to get the best bang for your buck within the organization. So that's the second part, which is analytics. One interesting thing that's happened out of analytics is that we've moved away from having these back office teams to generate reports for you into providing the power of analytics to the end users, including yourselves as CEOs and presidents of the companies. And the reason for that is that information is becoming so real-time and so critical today that by the time it takes for somebody to get the report, generate the nice PowerPoint that you want and put it on your desk, the world has already changed. And in order to get on top of that, the faster you get the information and see it in the way you want to, I think there is a big difference to that. Which means that, first of all, the platform that it runs on has to be a real-time platform that it can actually get all this information and generate it back to you in the fastest way. But on the main part is the consumption part. So today, I mean, again, just looking around with all the mobile devices that you have, you want to be able to access this information on your mobile device. If you have an iPad out there, you want to be able to see the latest report about how your company is doing in terms of your sales, your manufacturing, your pipeline on that mobile device instantly. And this is where the user experience starts to come in. All this has to be driven from a technology point of view as well as working with the different lines of business that you have within the organization. So with that, I think the IT finance partnership I think is a very important area. It's definitely an area where there's a lot of opportunity going forward, especially due to the digitization that we have. In the new world, given the way the consumers are looking at things, I think there is a lot of this that will come into fruition in the next years. We've maybe only seen the starting point of it. And what this fundamentally means for all of us is that on one hand, yes, we need to look at how to grow, but we also have the opportunity here to not just grow for local, but the opportunity to grow to serve the global market. With that, thank you.